if you drop your bike and damage the exhaust. The OEM replacement on one of these bikes cost almost 3 times as much as the other. And that's before we even talk about mods. So when people say, just buy a Tenere instead, there's one part of the cost almost nobody talks about. One of the most common comments I get on this channel is this: why don't you just buy a Tenere instead of spending money on mods? Sure, it can sound reasonable. So in this video, I want to break down that argument. Not opinions, not brand loyalty, mods, cost and real-world ownership. What people usually mean when they say just buy a Tenere is this: that the more expensive bike comes finished from factory, that mods are a sign the bike wasn't good enough to begin with, and that spending money on a cheaper bike somehow doesn't make sense. But that logic starts to fall apart when you look at how people actually use these bikes. Let's be clear about one thing first. This is not a riding comparison. I haven't ridden the Tenere 700, and that's not what this video is about. From the factory, these bikes sit in different segments, different engines, different price points, and maybe different intentions. But the moment you start riding them the way most ADV riders actually do, that's where things get interesting. If you look at how Tenere 700 owners actually modify their bikes, the pattern is very clear. Protection, ergonomics, meaning rider position, bars, pegs and controls, luggage and navigation, suspension, especially once you add weight or ride hard off-road. These are the same categories people upgrade on a 450MT. Not because the bikes are bad, but because factory setups are always a compromise. There's a common idea that the Tenere 700 somehow avoids these upgrades. In reality, many Tenere owners still upgrade suspension, still add protection, still change ergonomics for standing riding. Some even address known quirks that come up in real-world use. None of this is controversial. It's just how ownership actually works. This is where the aftermarket really starts to go in very different directions. Many core upgrades actually cost roughly the same on both bikes. Protection parts, basic ergonomics, luggage. The price difference isn't as big as people think. The real difference is what comes next. The Tenere has a very deep premium aftermarket. The 450MT gives you more ways to build the bike step by step. Same categories, different depth. So, instead of keeping this abstract, let's look at realistic examples. Not my exact build, not extreme setups, just a typical ADV off-road oriented configuration that a lot of riders end up with on both bikes. These numbers are not exact. They are realistic ranges, just to illustrate the difference. A CFMOTO 450MT typically sits around 6,500 to 7,000 euros. A Tenere 700 is usually somewhere between 10,500 and 11,500. Now, let's add the same type of upgrades: protection, ergonomics, luggage, maybe navigation, and tires. Both bikes runs the same 21-inch front and 18-inch rear. Suspension comes next. Not race setups, just springs and basic valving for rider weight, luggage and off-road use. When you add all of that up, a typical 450MT lands somewhere around 8,000 to 9,000 euros in total. A prepared Tenere with the same mods ends up closer to 12 or 15,000. Both bikes gets built. The Tenere still costs more, not because it avoids mods, but because it starts a lot higher. This is the part almost nobody include in this comparison. OEM replacement parts. Not aftermarket upgrades, just parts you might need after a drop. An OEM muffler for the T7 is around 476 euros. The OEM muffler for 450MT is about 173. And here is one important detail. The 450MT's muffler comes complete with complete assembly, including the head, heat shield and mounting hardware. The Tenere price is for the muffler only. The same pattern shows up elsewhere. An OEM crankcase cover for the Tenere is around 230 euros. The crankcase cover for 450MT is about 64. And the shift pedal. The Tenere part is roughly 113 euros, while the 450MT is closer to 84, again as a complete assembly. But even allowing for VAT differences, the gap here is simply too large to ignore. This isn't about aftermarket choices. This is about the real-world repair costs. When it comes to resale value, the Tenere 700 is easy to talk about, because it has been on the market long enough. And the Tenere does hold the value well. With the 450MT, it's a different situation. The bike was introduced 2024, so there simply isn't enough real-world resale data yet. So the honest takeaway is this. Yes, the Tenere has a proven resale track record. The 450MT's resale value is still unknown. And that uncertainty cuts both ways. What is certain is what you pay up front and what parts and repairs cost while you own the bike. So which one makes sense? A T7 makes sense if you want a bigger engine from day one and you are comfortable with a higher buy-in and a premium path. A 450MT makes sense if you want a lower entry cost, more flexibility, and you enjoy building the bike for your own needs. Neither choice is wrong. They are just different approaches. So when someone says, just buy a Tenere, what they're really expressing is a preference, not the universal truth. Modding a bike isn't a failure. It's a part of the ownership. And once you look at the full picture, mods, repair cost, and real-world use, the argument isn't nearly as simple as it sounds. The 450MT is often called a mini Tenere, and honestly, that's usually meant as a compliment, mostly because of the looks and the way it feels to ride. What I'm really curious about is what people who actually ridden both thinks. If you spend time on a Tenere 700 and the 450MT, how do they compare in the real world? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. ride safe, and see you in the next one.